Son las 10 de la mañana, es un momento, hemos tenido un día de mucho tema, sobre todo no solo económico, sino también de batalla cultural, de geopolítica. Es un placer aquí para Negocios recibir a Emmanuel Todd. Emmanuel Todd es uno de los escritores más prolíficos alrededor de la geopolítica. Sobre todo, su punto fundamental fue la caída de la URSS, cuando allá por finales de los 70 hizo un libro en el que decía la caída de la URSS y afinó en cómo se iba a producir y cuáles eran las claves de la caída. Ahora, lo contamos hace unas semanas, acaba de publicar, hace unos días aparecía ya en las librerías, La Derrota de Occidente. Ojo porque Emmanuel Todd es uno de los superventas importantes, por ejemplo en Francia, donde distintos medios de comunicación han puesto en la fotografía cómo este libro marca un camino que Occidente tiene que evitar, pero que va camino de ello. Thank you for having this time with us. Emmanuel Todd, good morning.
Good morning.
I was talking about the importance of the falling of the URSS in the end of the 70s. But now in the new book, this Derrota de Occidente, what do you think are the surprises of the Ukrainian war for the geopolitical chessboard?
Yes, well, this book is starts from the war in Ukraine, but it really is an analysis of the Western crisis, the crisis of the West. So it goes from the military situation to a deep analysis of the of what's wrong within American society. And what I try to write is a reasonable book written by a historian and a social anthropologist, and getting very far from ideological attitudes. So it's really an examination of what goes on, what's been going on in Russia, which has become much more stable. About the division of Ukrainian society, about the true attitude of the ex-popular democracies, the European crisis, the crisis in Britain, which is very severe, in Scandinavia, and of course, most importantly, about the United States. So I'm trying to reach the deep reasons for the war. I'm trying to get away from a superficial interpretation and a passionate interpretation.
In this picture, you could see that Ukraine has more powerful than Russia has at the beginning of the war. What do you think about this different point of view about Russia and how United States and Europe, this G7, could have changed the war?
Yeah, I think we all have a wrong perception of Ukraine. Before the war, Ukraine was conceived as a sort of almost a failed state with the diminishing population, with a disintegrating economy, and what appeared as a rather surprising efficiency of Ukraine in the war, getting us to the illusion that such a small and divided country could beat Russia somehow with Western help. But what we haven't been able to see, to understand, is that the war itself, I mean, the fight against Russia with American and Western money generally, has made it possible to for the Ukrainians, or at least for the Ukrainian government, or those who control Ukraine, to find some meaning to the existence of Ukraine. So Ukraine is not what we think. It's not a Western democracy. It's turned into a kind of sad, nihilistic state where war has become the meaning of life or national life. So it's and of course I'm conscious of the immense sufferings of the Ukrainians, and but I think of course, the Russians have invaded Ukraine. There's no question about it. I call it an invasion, not a special military operation. But I think the West and the US, but not simply the US, Europe also, has a great deal of responsibility on the horror that's become ordinary life in Ukrainian society, because we sort of induced the Ukrainians to think that we could help them win the war. And what has in fact happened is that the West, the Europeans, of course, but also more surprisingly, the Americans, have simply been unable to give them enough arms and equipment to simply fight the Russians. We got them into an incredible situation where we fooled them. We gave the Ukrainians the impression that we were going to help them win the war, and we are about to let them down.
Is the West facing its defeat and its downfall?
I think now what we must all think about, I think when you follow what's happening on the battlefields, the way the Ukrainians lack men, weapons, and so on, we must, what we know, what people observed in the Pentagon and elsewhere, is that we're getting very close to a Russian victory. Now the question is, do we accept that victory? Do we accept to negotiate and find a reasonable agreement which would make it possible for Ukraine to survive in some form, which would make it possible for us to accept the need of Russia for security? That is, they don't want NATO in Ukraine, and I think they will take Odessa and so on, because the Crimea is not safe without the possession of Odessa. And whether we accept our defeat, it's always possible to accept a defeat, or whether we, that is the Europeans and the Americans, sort of get into a state of denial where they want to escalate and bring European countries into the war. This is a very serious moment, because we're talking about letting the Ukrainians use American, British, and French weapons to strike the Russian territory itself. And it's amazing the way, well, I don't know about Spain. Spain is a reasonable country these days, contrary to Britain and France. But I don't know whether, well, what's certain that in France, the press is not even telling people what the Russian reaction will be or would be to an attack on Russian territory. Vladimir Putin just gave a press conference in Tashkent, in Uzbekistan, where he explained, during which he explained that these, the long-range cruise missiles cannot be used without participation, or in fact, can only be used with full participation of the military, French, British or American army personnel, and without the use of French, British or American satellites, and that the Russians would consider such a use of Western equipment as a direct attack by France, Britain, or the US upon Russia, and that they would retaliate. This is all very logical and simple and normal. But what is worrying is that the West is getting into a state of unreality denial, that we are not even conscious that the situation is very serious. So this is beyond the book. The book is about long-term processes. I explain how the collapse of Protestantism in the US or Britain led to social, educational inefficiency and decline and the disappearance of industrial forces and so on. But now, beyond the book is, the book makes it possible to understand why Russia has been able to survive the sanctions, why Russia has been able, in fact, to face the West in spite of its very small GDP. But now we have also an immediate problem, and I'm happy I can talk about it now.
For me, it was amazing your explanation in the book about the Protestantism and how this fallen was the beginning of the fallen of the West. Could you explain in some words about how this Max Weber, the ethics of the Protestantism, was the key, the main key about the going up for the West and now the downfall?
Yeah, this is the heart of the book. I'm glad you talk about it. It's well, in Max Weber's view, that was before the First World War, it was pretty obvious that the rise of the West was in fact the rise of Protestantism, because for a very simple reason. Protestantism wants all believers to be able to read the Holy Scriptures. And so in all Protestant countries, the various churches made it possible, or made it even an obligation for people to be able to read and write. And also Protestantism produce a certain kind of morality, a specific type of anxiety, and this led to the educational and industrial takeoff in Germany, at least northern Germany and Scandinavian countries, or Britain, and then the US was the beginning, very simply a Protestant country. But now, if you and then you've got the story of the rise of the West and so on, and then France sort of kept up in the race because it was very close to the Protestant world. Things got difficult for Spain and Italy as Catholic countries, where the church fighted, sort of give a fight against education, literacy, and so on. But what is interesting now is to realize that, well, if Max Weber was right, and he was, we must be able to admit and face the fact that the complete disappearance of Protestantism, not simply religious practice, but the basic social attitudes connected with Protestantism, well, the disappearance of all this has simply produced the disappearance of the superiority of these Protestant countries. And when you've got the hypothesis that Protestantism was the rise of the West, well, you get to the very easily to the conclusion that the disappearance of Protestantism explained the decline of the American economy, the collapse of the industrial system, the decrease in the intellectual level of American populations. And then there you reach the heart of the crisis of the West. But this is what we feel when we talk about the United States and the kind of mad country that the US is becoming, with Trump a vulgar and violent man against Biden, a senile old man insisting on war in various places in the world, when you see the internal disintegration of American society, well, you have the heart of the problem. But you must, if you really want to understand, you must be able to understand and feel throughout history the importance of religion. Religion was important when it was alive, but what is difficult for us is that as we have reached the stage of what I call zero religion, zero Catholicism, zero Protestantism, religion is still important in a kind of negative way, because religion gave societies a structure, a form, even after it had disappeared at some point. I call this intermediate stage zombie religion. And then it's on. I have one doubt. As I'm talking to Spanish people, I'll give a doubt. Something I don't talk about in the book. I left the thing for later research. I talk about zero Protestantism. I can talk about zero Catholicism. I explain that in the US we move the zero Protestantism produces what I call nihilism. I mean, without deprived of religious belief, of a meaning of life, people turn to a sort of a worship of the void, of nothing, which is nihilism, and they develop a passion for destruction, for the destruction of things, people, or reality, and this described for Protestantism. As for Catholic countries, I have doubts. I think we have reached a state of zero religion in France, in Spain, I think in Italy also. But I do not feel that zero Catholicism leads to the same state of negativity, to the same importance of nihilism as zero religion does in Protestant countries. I have a feeling, I can't prove it, but I have an intuition that zero religion in Catholic countries produces less nihilism than in Protestant countries. But of course, there's a contradiction, because if you got zero religion, zero is zero, you see, and Catholic and Protestant countries should be alike, the same, but something is less. And I feel that, these days, it's pretty possible that we discover that Spain, Italy, and even France are more reasonable than ex-Protestant countries.
Only one question more. If the West is falling, who is rising? China?
Well, no, it's the book is not entirely pessimistic, but I think this war will be a defeat for everybody, because there is a general crisis of modernity that we can observe and feel through very low birth rates. I mean, and with a sort of inability of populations to reproduce themselves. And this is true, of course, of the whole of the West, but this is true of Russia. And this is even more true of China or Japan. Japan, of course, is part of the West in a political way. So the situation is not at all up. I published a book in Japan a couple of years ago, immediately after the beginning of the war, called about the beginning of the Third World War. And I think that in a way, in a strange way, this is the Third World War. But it will not be like the previous two. After the First World War, the European countries were turned out to be able to get into a second one. They had enough energy left for that. And after the Second World War, countries like France, Germany, Italy still have enough energy to sort of experience a wonderful economic takeoff and the development of a consumer society. And the energy of the society has something to do with the fertility rate of the population and the ability of populations to reproduce themselves. But after this, well, let's call it a special kind of war, what we'll have is aged populations, decreasing population, which means that peace will be easy because there will not be enough energy to go on being aggressive and war-minded. But there will be nobody will get out of this ridiculous or absurd fight, and no country will be described as the winner and able to rule the world or anything. And China, even less than others, because the fertility rate in China is at most 1.3 children per woman, and the population of China has already started decreasing. It's very old, so it's well. While I say this, I'm obviously in a way pessimistic because a decreasing and aging population is a sad thing. But the optimistic element is that the energy for war, for fight, for domination will have left us. So we'll be in a strange kind of peace.
Thank you very much for this book and for this interview. Good day, good business. Emmanuel Todd.
Thank you. And thanks very much to you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. 10:25 de la mañana, ha sido mucha entrevista en inglés. Les recojo un pequeño fragmento de lo que hemos hablado con Emmanuel Todd. Dice Emmanuel Todd en esta entrevista que acabamos de tener: o aceptamos nuestra derrota, Occidente, o entonces queremos escalar y llevar a los países europeos a la guerra. Es un momento muy serio, nos ha dicho. Los ucranianos usan armas de Estados Unidos, Reino Unido y Francia para golpear territorio ruso. Y ha dicho, hablando de España, es increíble el modo en que España, que es un país razonable, ha dicho, reasonable country, pero no se está diciendo a la población cuál será la reacción de Rusia si se ataca su territorio con armas españolas. Putin, dice, dio una conferencia de prensa en Uzbekistán hace un par de días, explicando que estos misiles de largo alcance no pueden ser usados sin que impliquen la participación plena de personal del ejército francés, británico o americano. Estoy contando las notas que he tomado durante la entrevista, porque yo creo que esto es lo más llamativo. Dice, esto los rusos lo considerarán como un uso de equipamiento occidental con ataques directos de uno de estos tres países, Estados Unidos, Francia o América, Estados Unidos, perdón. Dice, pero lo que es preocupante es que Occidente está entrando en un escenario de negación de la realidad, en que no somos ni siquiera conscientes de que la situación es muy seria. Esto está, dice, a lo largo de mi libro, y hace posible entender por qué Rusia ha sido capaz de sobrevivir a las sanciones, de enfrentarse a Occidente. Ahora hay un problema que es inmediato. 10:26 de la mañana, 5 de la tarde, Club Bilderberg, aquí en Madrid, reunidos para ver la fotografía del mundo que viene, o que ellos quieren que venga. Buen día. y buen negocio.